Hey, you guys hear me? Let's see if this works. Someone want to just pop in the someone just pop in the chat if you can hear me. Sound good? TJ, is that good? Can everybody hear me? Thank you. Okay, appreciate it. All right, I've got my got a glass of red here. I'm trying to answer these questions. So, all right, I got a lot of questions in the queue, so let's get to this. Matthew's asking me, is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time for first time? Is it a good time for first time home buyers to jump into this crazy market? Should I jump in with the belief that the Fed and the Bank of Canada will come in for help every time a crisis happens? Yeah, loaded question. I think that I don't like giving blanket advice that everybody, regardless of who you are, should be buying. I think that you have to kind of assess your own financial stability, your risk tolerance. So my personal opinion is, like, obviously if you're buying a principal residence, for a longer term outlook, 10 years, I'm not really too worried about it. But again, at the same time, does that mean, like, people ask me all the time, I don't recommend liquidating all your other assets just to get a down payment for a house and have all of your financial assets or net worth into one single asset class. But if you have some spare cash, if you have extra money lying around for a down payment, and you want to get some exposure to, like, real estate, then yeah, I think it's a good, for sure. I think that there's always a risk that central bankers lose control. I think eventually they will, but I think that is probably quite a few years down the road. Veronica's asking me if you would invest in the hospitality sector, cruises, airlines. Not really my forte expertise. I mean, I have a couple, like, COVID plays that I like. One of them being EQR, Equity Residential. It's a company founded and run by Sam Zell. He's one of my mentors or idols in the real estate space. He's an absolute legend. And they invest in residential apartment buildings. They're actually the largest residential apartment owner in the United States, with properties in Los Angeles, New York, Boston, Denver, and their stock right now, I think, is down about 40% still. And I think that obviously the rents have taken a hit because of those, the suburban or the urban exodus. But I think that once COVID goes away, I think people are going to move back into the downtown cores, or back out of the suburbs, in my opinion. Lex, sorry to hear about your job loss. Any advice on getting your real estate license? Yeah, save as much money as you can, because the first couple of years are pretty tough, and I'd recommend getting on a real estate team. Ty says, although both assets will be beneficiaries in a confetti money environment, do you think real estate will continue to outperform precious metals over the next 2 to 3 years? I think precious metals will outperform real estate, but the thing that people miss, in my opinion, on real estate is the ability to lever. Basically at 1.5%. So the thing is, like, if you're just buying, yeah, I guess you can use a leveraged stock trading account. But, like, let's just say if you're investing in your TFSA, you're investing through your TFSA, or let's say RRSPs, like, you don't have that ability to lever. So that's kind of my opinion. That's why I like real estate for that aspect, is, like, it gives you the ability to lever. Obviously, try not to over leverage, but that's really, like, the biggest gain for, like, Canadians, right? These people are putting down, let's say, you put $100,000 down payment, and it goes up 10% a year, and in a couple of years later, you're making you're doubling or tripling your value, just because you're getting all the access to the leverage. So that's really the benefit of real estate. Do you see any large increases to property tax, with Vancouver being the lower end of the large cities and its local officials hitting these increases? I think that real estate. I actually just wrote my newsletter for Monday morning on this. You'll see that tomorrow. But if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, just go onto my website, stevesaretsky.com. But I actually wrote this as my biggest view, my strongest conviction in the real estate space is that you're going to continue to see a lot more government intervention. You're going to see a lot more taxation, strictly because policymakers, monetary policy is not going to change. So they're going to continue to inflate asset values and asset prices. And they've already said that they don't care about house values. It's not in their mandate. And so I think that policymakers on the federal side are going to be forced and they're going to be prompted to intervene to try to stem further inequalities. And so there's going to be a lot more taxation and policies that are aimed, in my opinion, at the housing market. Let's see what else we have. The Bird says, Steve, could you elaborate on the moral consequences of low interest rates and fiscal policy? For example, are we creating a society full of unaccountable citizens that depends on governments? Yeah, I think that obviously you've created a environment where people are always expecting the next bailout. The central banks, like basically the markets have gotten so large, right? So again, this is something that I've written on, is that asset prices drive the economy, not the economy drives asset prices. So asset prices drive the economy. And so asset prices today require stimulus. And if you remove that stimulus, asset prices will fall and they'll pull the economy down with it. So through that, they feel inclined that they have to continue to support asset prices. Like you can imagine, like obviously the incredible run we've seen in the stock market this year. I just look at it and say, could you imagine if these guys said, okay, we're stopping quantitative easing tomorrow? I think that there'd be a huge sell-off in the stock market instantly. And that would just kind of be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think, unfortunately, yes, we're creating, I just don't think there's ever been free markets. And I think we see that now, is I think we're going to continue to go down the road of Japanification, which is that the bond market becomes nationalized, where the central banks basically own all the government debt, and they become larger and larger shareholders of the stock market. So I think that the Bank of Japan is becoming one of the largest shareholders in the Nikkei. So I think that's kind of the path that we're going to be going down. Someone says, do you think it's possible to have a condo property correction while actual land value increases and housing with land increases? I mean, there's a possibility where you can oversupply a condo market and condo prices can come down, but usually that would also drive the value of the land down, because if you think about it, developers, when they buy land, they're buying it based on a pro forma. So the pro forma says, okay, if I buy this land, what can I redevelop it to, and what can I sell them for? So if they say, well, I'm buying this piece of land, this development land, and the condos that I used to be able to build and sell for 1,000 a square feet, I can only sell for 900 a square foot. That's automatically going to result in them offering a lower price. It has to work for their pro forma. So it's typically not how it works in a real estate cycle. Usually land values will follow like the general market. But obviously, yes, we are building a lot of new condos. So I think that you can see a dampener on the increase in condos. So for example, you could see single family, like we're seeing now. So you can see single families going up 10, 15%, while you can see the condo market being flat. Someone's asking again about property taxes. I think I already answered that. But yes, I think that the biggest risk, or the biggest headwind for the real estate market in Canada, is going to be further taxation and policies designed around curbing inequality. Don says, do you think a currency reset is inevitable? And how does the average person protect their savings? I don't think there's like a currency reset per se. I mean, I think like, could you have a new world reserve currency in 5, 10, 15 years from now? I think that's a decent probability. But I think what's most likely to happen is you're going to continue to see the erosion of currencies. Like they're just not going to buy you what they used to. Like fiat currencies, and I think that's the move that you're seeing is, in stocks, in real estate, in Bitcoin. I think it's all correlated. People are just like, well, I can't have too much cash in my checking account or my savings account because I'm not getting any sort of return, and everybody's scared about inflation, and everybody's looking what central banks do, and that's part of the central banks. People don't understand is the whole goal of central bank policy, so monetary policy, is they do something called forward guidance. Forward guidance is essentially just them trying to basically scare people into thinking that they're going to do, they're going to be able to create inflation. So a lot of it is actually psychological. Gilbert's asking me, what do you think on the possibility of taxing on principal residence? I actually don't put a high probability on that in Canada. I just think, again, like 69% of the home ownership rate in Canada is 69%. So why would you, like, if you're trying to rebuild your economy, if you're trying to spur GDP growth and get out of a really hot, deep recession, the last thing you should be doing is taxing everybody's largest wealth asset. So that just wouldn't make any, I just think from a political standpoint, it would make no sense. I don't think the policymakers are that dumb. I actually think they're typically inclined to support valuations because, as I mentioned earlier, asset prices are the real economy. Or asset prices drive the economy, I should say. Ooh, we've got a lot of questions here. Give me a minute. Oh my God, what do we got here? I'm going to try to get through all these, but there's just not going to happen here. Someone purchased the Psychology Money book, said it was great. Yeah, it's a really good read. I think that's probably, in terms of building foundational understanding of personal finance, my 2 book recommendations would be Psychology Money and Rich Dad Poor Dad. Will downtown commercial office space get converted into residential condos? Possibly. I think that, yeah, I'm still fairly bullish on commercial office space. I think over the next couple of years, for sure, you're going to see new supply contract immensely. And I think that there's going to be an initial oversupply, but I still think I think we're social beings. And so my personal opinion and my personal view is that while there will be more work from home and hybrid models, I still think that a lot of people and a lot of companies are going to want people in the office. Again, I don't know, personally, I think there's a lot of people that just need to get out and socialize, get out of their house, at least, even if that's a couple times a week. So I'm still personally fairly bullish on working at an office. What's the outlook on Tsawwassen Ladner housing market in the summer? I think it'll stay relatively strong. I think it's a little bit too hot right now. I think it's personally will simmer down. Steve, do you believe there will be more inventory on the market once COVID is completed that will cause a cooling of all these prices? Are we also not worried about the insolvency affecting the economy? That's a good question. I think right now supply is extremely constrained you have the lowest supply in Canadian housing market history. So I think that parts of the market will ease. But I think right now is you have to consider so the largest constraint right now is in the single family housing market because everybody wants more space. Everybody's trying to upsize. At the same time, people that would normally downsize don't want to downsize right now for obvious reasons. And so that's where the most of your supply constraint is, and that's where you're seeing most of the price appreciation. So I think that when COVID goes away, obviously I think that inventory and that demand will subside. But I will say this is like the condo market right now is fairly soft to balanced. And I think that you're not part of the reason is that investors aren't really active in the market right now. So what was driving the condo market over the last couple of years has been investors, mom and pop, buying one-bedroom condos to rent out, etc. And I think a lot of them are quite nervous right now. A lot of them are seeing obviously the rent prices coming down. But I think as confidence in the economy starts to come back, jobs start to be regained, I think that the investors will come back. And personally, I'm already seeing that downtown Vancouver. In my opinion, that market has taken a significant turn over the last 3 to 4 weeks. And so I think that what I'm personally seeing is you're seeing some investors getting back into the market, feeling that the worst is behind us in terms of the sharp downturn, and we're going to slowly rebuild out of this. Do you see Canada ever moving away from real estate being the main contributor to GDP? No, but I think that it might slow. I think I still view my personal opinion is eventually Canadian real estate is going to have a reckoning of some degree. It's going to have. I still think we're going to have a significant pullback, whether that's in 18 months or in 5 years. I still think at some point the valuations are so stretched that anytime you get any sort of tick up in real yields, I still think that you could easily see a 20% pullback on a national level, which would be pretty significant. But they'll still go back to the same well, which is they'll try to rebuild that asset class. Someone basically just asked me again, same sort of question. Do you think the real estate bubble will ever pop? Yeah, I think it will eventually, but I think the bond market, like something will go wrong. It might not be in Canada. It'll go wrong in Europe or something. Yields will rise. Yields will start blowing out. And then you'll have mortgage rates going from 1.5% up to 3%. And that's when you start to get problems. But today, obviously, the central banks are implicitly supporting those rates. They're talking about yield curve control. They're talking about intervening. So it depends really on how much confidence you have in central banks' ability to do that, to keep rates pinned to the floor. What are your thoughts on when or if we'll see a Fed coin? There's actually been some legislation that's been trying to get pushed through right now to have to get everybody on a central bank digital wallet at the Fed. So that's actually going through some political processes right now. So I think everybody will have a wallet at the central bank in the next 2 years. Someone's asking me what's the difference between a normal real estate salesman and Zolo Realty. Zolo is exact same thing, but they pay their agents basically get given leads. The agents basically don't have to work for their own business per se. The company gives them internet leads, but then they have to cut back 40% of the commissions back to the brokerage. So it's kind of like, I have nothing bad to say about Zolo, but it's more, they don't recruit top producers. That's not their angle. So someone's asking, since policymakers continue to support or continue to inflate asset prices, why doesn't this stuff ever get into the mainstream media? Well, I think you have to ask yourself who owns mainstream media, for one. And number two is like, to the reporters and like the news anchors, for example, do they actually understand monetary policy? Do they actually even know what a central bank does? It's kind of just like a gray, dark area where it's almost like a conspiracy theory to like talk about money and how it's created and what a central bank does. Most people just don't know. They don't really want to be bothered, right? Most people just want to watch football on Sunday, and the media, I don't think, talks about it because it's a complicated subject that not most people understand, for one. And number two is that obviously if that got out, there would probably be riots on the street. So I think it's kind of almost in everybody's best interest to not talk about it. Someone said if you had 20% of your savings in gold, 15% in Bitcoin, and enough for a 20% down payment in a condo, would you buy a condo to allocate some money and avoid potential devaluation? Yes, I would personally. If I had no real estate holdings and I already had substantial savings and investments built up into gold and Bitcoin and stocks, for example, then I still believe in being somewhat diversified personally. But again, I'm not saying that's the right for every person, but personally I would. Personally, I do. That's what I'm doing. What's your 5-year expectation of real estate in cities like Vancouver and Toronto, and what would it take to change your bullish short-term view? I think my next 5-year outlook, I still think that the growth prospects for real estate, I don't think are that strong. I just think that valuations in Vancouver and Toronto are quite stretched. And while I think that it's nice to have access to the mortgage at 1.5%, where you're paying down more than 50% of your mortgage payment goes towards principal, I don't think that there's a whole huge amount of upside. People that are expecting like 10, 15% annual increases for the next 5 years, like we saw in the last 5 years, I think will be mistaken. I still think there's some upside there, but I just think, like, obviously, again, rates are already at 1.5%. I think they could easily go down to like 1%, but there's not a whole lot left of juice per se to squeeze. Again, I still think values will go up, but in the next 5 years, I think the upside is a little bit more limited. Oh, and what would it take to change my bullish short-term view? I need a rise in real interest rates. So if the Bank of Canada is unsuccessful at, or policymakers are unsuccessful at keeping rates down, and mortgage rates go from 1.5 to 2.5, then I think that valuations will come down. Anthony says, how closely do you follow true money supply when making predictions and analysis for real estate stock markets? The reason I ask is a big determining factor in asset inflation. True money supply, I mean, I usually just look at M2. And so maybe not as like accurate or Austrian economics, but I think M2 in Canada, last I checked, is up about 15%. So could you imagine increasing your money supply this year by 15% and then like still being bullish about holding cash? It seems kind of counterproductive. Someone's saying, apart from Toronto and Vancouver, many smaller cities such as Windsor, Ontario, properties up 25% since last year. Do you think it keeps increasing going forward? I think the suburbs are kind of stretched, to be honest, but I think that that's a secular trend. There's a secular trend happening that I think is going to continue, in that if you look at what's happening in the United States, for example, is everybody's leaving these expensive, unaffordable cities. So everybody's leaving, San Francisco, Manhattan, and the state of California, for example. Everybody's relocating to Texas, where you have affordable housing, you have no state income, you have no state tax. Same thing in Miami. You have these massive migration flows, and I think that's really just a result of people opting to relocate out of necessity because they can't afford to do so. And so I think that trend is in Canada. Unfortunately, we don't really have the luxuries of leaving. Like you don't like most people just we don't outside of Vancouver and Toronto. It's just not that many great cities, unfortunately. And no offense to hey, I like Calgary, but look the weather. I like okay, Ottawa. Like there's not a whole lot of options. I mean, so I think that people are basically going to be forced further and further out into these suburbs, not necessarily because they want to be, because it's an affordability problem. Because I don't think affordability is going to get any better or meaningfully better over the next, say 5 years. And so I think people that are young and starting families, like you have no other option. You have to relocate and get out of these cities. So I'm fairly bullish in the suburbs, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years. Leo says thoughts on crypto. Bullish, but I mean, it depends. I don't really call like Bitcoin I think is its own class. I mean, people call it crypto, but I recently got into Ethereum. Been bullish. I'm still sort of understanding a little bit, so I don't really have a strong opinion on that. But I've been long Bitcoin for probably 18 months. So obviously the recent run's been pretty good, but I think it's got a lot more room to go. So when are we selling Bitcoin? I'm not personally, but I think right now the recent run up looks pretty frothy. I would definitely anticipate a pullback. I think it's an asset class where it wouldn't be unrealistic to have a 30-40% pullback in the next month or two. Someone's asking me, have you heard anything more about the city of Vancouver implementing parking permits for homeowners and road tolls? No, but I think it's going to continue. It's going to continue. It will happen. Maybe not the road tolls, but they'll keep pushing for it. It's really just a tax revenue grab. It's being used. It's being wrapped into the global warming, climate change wrapper. But the reality is they're just desperate for tax revenues. Brian says, do you see the condo market in Q1 of 2021 entering balanced market or buyer's market for Metro Vancouver? I mean, it's right now, it's balanced. I think it'll probably stay balanced. And I think eventually, I think it will flip to more of a seller's market, actually, personally. I think that the investors aren't active in the market yet, but I think they're slowly starting to come back. And once they come back, I think then, and it's the same sort of thing we saw in 2016 where single family eventually just gets so expensive that people get priced out of it and then they have to go down the rung. They have to adjust their expectations. And that's when the condo market then starts to outperform the single family market for at least a short period of time. Someone says you're not bullish Calgary after fiscal adjust for the K-shaped recovery in GTA and Manhattan. I actually am bullish on Calgary. That's why I own property there. But I don't really anticipate like bullish. I'm not bullish in the fact that like I'm expecting property values to go up quite a bit. I'm just bullish in the fact that I think they're going to continue. I think they'll get over the next 5 to 10 years. I think they're going to start to see people relocating there. I think that if they can figure out how to shift at least somewhat away from oil and gas and into tech, I think it's a similar way to like Texas. It's like the Texas of like, it could be the Texas of Canada where people start relocating there because it's an affordable lifestyle. You can own a single family house for $500,000, lower taxes. I think overall you can have a pretty good lifestyle there. But yeah, sure, the weather's not great, but I mean, I don't know if I'd say the weather is great in Vancouver. It rains 60% of the time. Thoughts on Montreal market? Pretty bullish. I said that I was bullish on it a couple of years ago. Again, if I'm like a Canadian, and I think the number one options, like most people are probably, if you had to pick like where do you want to live in Canada, most people would probably say Vancouver 1, Toronto 2, Montreal 3, or Toronto 1, Vancouver 2, Montreal 3. So makes sense that that starts to become your third most expensive property market. Brian, what are your thoughts on Oak Ridge development? Is it overpriced? Yes, it's disgustingly overpriced. You should be around Albertans, though. I don't have a bro. I like Albertans. Is it a good time to buy a principal residence in Kelowna? I like Kelowna. I'm pretty bullish on that. So this is why move to Calgary for tech when there's big tech hubs in Vancouver. It's just because Calgary is a quarter of the price. So you could say the same thing. Why are these tech hubs moving to Miami and Houston when you could move to Silicon Valley? It's like because as a tech company, do you know how cheap office space is in Calgary? It's a 20% occupancy in downtown Calgary. So these companies can go in and rent, grade A office space in downtown Calgary for pennies on the dollar and not have to pay, corporate taxes are lower too. So to me as a company, it actually makes a lot more sense, at least from a dollar and cents perspective. When the government will start introducing policies to curb investors in real estate, maybe not this year, 2021, but 2022. I think you'll see more of that. Like, I don't know, if I was a policymaker and I was trying to address housing affordability or inequalities, created by, let's say, monetary policy. So if I was trying to tackle a wealth gap, which is obviously what you have today, I would probably create policies that incentivize or help first-time home buyers into the housing market, while at the same time limiting or restricting investors to speculate and accumulate, properties. Like, you can't have a generation that can't even afford one property, and then you have another generation accumulating 5 or 6, 7 properties. So you have to try to find policies to counteract that. Obviously, I think that's going to be tough politically to push through, because there's a lot of opposition. The big money talks, right? I mean, people that own multiple properties obviously have the influence. So, but I think eventually it will happen. Do you think immigration will slow in Canada with Biden becoming investor friendly? I think immigration will slow regardless in Canada because the labor market sucks. But yeah, it's possible that you could see some. I mean, the Canadian government's going to do what they can. But at the end of the day, you need jobs for immigrants to come here, and so if the labor market's soft like it is, I think that immigration is going to be constrained for the next couple of years. Someone says I would buy a condo in Calgary where the strata fees are higher. I think if you're buying in Calgary, you should be buying the land because it's so cheap. What are your thoughts on getting rid of capital gains on rentals and adding tax to primary bought and sold within 5 years? I don't think they're gonna get rid of capital gains on rentals, but I actually think that's a pretty strong probability. Is that, yeah, you'll probably see a speculation tax on people that buy and sell primary residences. within a couple of years, right? So if you buy a condo and you move in 2 years, and then it gets charged as a capital gain instead of a tax-free, I can see that for sure. Because I think there's definitely some loopholes in that. People are kind of taking advantage of that. Someone's asking central bank digital currencies. What are the third and fourth order effects? I think it has the ability to impose negative interest rates. I think it has the ability to shape how people spend and what they do with their money. It has the ability. You basically have the ability to incorporate. You have the ability to incorporate emotional behaviors into it. So you can basically nudge people to do what you want. So for example, if you have a central bank digital wallet and you have, let's say they can say, hey, this guy's wealthy. He's got $500,000 cash sitting in this central bank digital wallet. Like, hey, we're in a recession. We need people to go out and spend money. This guy's just hoarding cash. He's just sitting on it. Let's impose a negative 3% interest rate on this guy. And then, let's say you have a student now going to university and they hardly have any savings. And the government obviously has full transparency that they can say, okay, well, let's give this poor guy, 3% interest on his savings, because he obviously could use some help. So I think that there's more ability to sort of manipulate people how they see fit. Do I think the Bank of Canada will head to negative interest rates down the road? Yeah, I think it's a possibility, but I think it probably won't be for at least a couple of years. I think it'll be like the next sort of stumbling block, but I think they'll do everything they can before they go negative, but I think eventually they might be forced to if you get another downturn. Have you seen any increase in buying from residents leaving Hong Kong? No, not really. Not enough to move a market. Obviously, right now there's not really any travel or immigration right now. So, but a little bit before that. How do I see the condo market in Surrey Central in the near future? Lots of towers going. Too much supply. I think prices aren't going to move there for a little while. If I was buying detached there, yeah, fairly bullish. But condos in Surrey, there's just too much building. Now the bonds are at all-time low bond yields. What do you think about the possible compression of cap rates in the multifamily market due to institutional players? Yeah, that's going to continue to be a story. I think institutions are going to continue to pump and come into the housing market, which is what we're seeing. We're seeing all these like real estate startups, companies like Zillow, I think Redfin, Open Door. There's a bunch of these programs basically coming out where they're basically they're becoming like these large corporations are basically becoming like property flippers at scale on a corporate level. And so I think that's basically enabled by a low interest rate environment where the cost of capital is so low. And so, yeah. Someone's saying, how does this all end in 2040? What does the market look like? Yeah. If you're asking me about like what the central bank end game is, I think eventually they'll own the entire bond market. They'll basically write off the debt, and you kind of have, you'll basically have some form of basically a debt jubilee. That's basically like the end game, or you get massive inflation. Can you touch on the mortgage deferrals and where that now stands? I know there's a post share. Yeah, so my buddy Ben Rabideau, North Cope Advisors, put out a post. I've been tracking this probably just as close as he has, but the mortgage deferrals have all like basically rolled off. There's not really a whole lot of deferrals still in place. Obviously, just because you've off your deferrals doesn't necessarily mean that you won't go delinquent in like 6 months from now. But I still think that the fiscal and monetary stimulus is kind of overpowering the stress in the markets, and we're actually seeing banks are aggressively refining people as well. And we're not really seeing from the private lenders in the mix, you're not really seeing a whole lot of demand, or they're not really, the private lenders in the mix will be the first to see delinquencies, they'll be the first to see distress, and right now they're not having any of that. So I'm not really too worried about it, to be honest. I was very concerned about mortgage deferrals back in March, April, May, June, July, and then as we started to see what was happening in the market, I'm just not really concerned about them, to be honest. I think it's a non-event. Yeah, I do. You see Condo Strata fees going significantly higher. I think they'll go higher. So one thing about condo strata fees nobody really talks about is they have these contingency funds, right? Especially for like a high rise. So let's say you have like I don't know, $500,000, $1 million in contingency fund. They can't invest that contingency fund in like Bitcoin, at least not yet. They can't put that contingency fund in like Apple stock. They hold it in GICs. And so, if you have $1 million in a contingency fund of a strata, and you're yielding, your return on your investment in that GIC is like 0.5%, and inflation is, let's say, 2%, even though it's arguably much higher. Like, it's really going to be tough for them to sort of keep up. And so I think that a lot of these stratas are going to be underfunded, and they're going to have to raise more and more money through special levies and stuff when projects come due, because this is one of the repercussions of this zero interest rate policy, is things like pension funds, strata corporations that have to, basically legally invest their money in these safe instruments. They really get crushed. When do you see rates going up? Not for a long time. Someone's asked about the Winnipeg market. Honestly, I don't know. I don't have anything to say about the Winnipeg market. I don't know enough about it. Thoughts on high yielding blue chip dividend stocks? Yeah, sure. I mean, long term investment play, if that's your boat. I don't really see the problem with that. Probably better than holding bonds. Someone's asking if money velocity increases, do you see us going into hyperinflation? I mean, obviously that's a recipe for inflation. It is have money velocity picking it up, but people will lose confidence in the currency. I think people are already kind of losing confidence in the currency. If you look at asset prices, valuations don't really matter anymore. Someone said the US has been running QE for years. How come the price jumps only happen this year? What about Japan or Europe with negative interest rate? Yeah, but look at the M2 in the US. I think it's up like 20% this year. Look at M2 over the past decade. It's not even close. Not only that, but look at the return in the US stock market over the last 10 years. And it's been a pretty good thing. QE's been pretty good for the stock market. Japan, I think you got a whole host of issues. Aging demographics, no immigration, shrinking population. Europe's a basket case because you have one monetary policy. You have one monetary policy for all these different countries. It makes no sense. You can't devalue your currency? You can't run massive fiscal deficits because you're bound by the European Union. It's a disastrous policy. I was asking, do you see commercial real estate going down in value in 2020? I mean, it's already going down. So, office space, I think will continue. I think office retail will continue to get hit, particularly retail. So a lot of questions coming in here. Ethereum or Bitcoin or both. But I don't know. I don't have too strong of a conviction on Ethereum. I'm still doing a lot of my due diligence. Been, like I said, very bullish Bitcoin for the last 18 months. Your thoughts on using a HELOC and longing the SPY or GLD/Bitcoin? Yeah, I mean, if you can, comes down to risk tolerance. I mean, that's personally probably not something I would do, at least not today. I just don't, but I also don't feel like I need to maximize gains through leverage. I prefer to sleep at night knowing I don't have like that kind of exposure. I don't know, but to each their own. Advice for first time homebuyer in the GTA given to FOMO during limited supply or waited out. Depends what you're looking to buy. Depends how much cash you have. Why do you want to buy? How long your holding period is? There's so many variables. I hate giving blanket advice. But if you're asking me strictly on where I think prices will be in the GTA, I mean, I don't see, unless you get higher rates, which I don't think we're going to get. I don't see the bear case for residential real estate. Well, the new Amazon office building 22 moved the downtown Vancouver condo market. Yes, I mean, I think that's what I'm saying. I'm not like, that's why I'm still bullish on downtown cores. All the big companies are still going downtown. Do you see Bitcoin as a trade or a legitimate place of fiat? Neither. I don't see Bitcoin as a trade per se. I mean, you can trade it if you want. I just don't think I have the ability to trade that. I don't have really any desire to trade it. And I don't really think it's going to replace fiat. I think it's its own asset class. I look at it, again, I'm not saying this is the right or wrong answer, but for me personally, how I look at it, as I look at it more of like a digital gold or it's basically just like a new savings account. In my opinion, it's an alternative investment. There's going to be a lot of volatility, but I think that it has it's like tech. I think you have people that miss Bitcoin, I think miss the power of technology and networking, the power of a network, growing similar to like Facebook. Like, it's like, yeah, you can start your own cryptocurrency, but it's really all about the network and the ability to like create the network. The network effects are basically what drive its value. And it's like, it's not that easy just to create a million users, or like for like my YouTube channel. It's not that easy just to start a YouTube channel and get like 50,000 subscribers in the first year. It's not that easy. But it's like, once you have that becomes an asset. Paul's asking where he can buy bonds and sell them back to the Bank of Canada at a higher price. You have to be like an institution. There's like minimum requirements to buy bonds. So yes, the Bank of Canada buys them back off institutions. Yeah, somebody's already asking about taxes on real estate. Yes, I said that they will continue to increase taxes on real estate. Currently at 47% loan to value with my properties. What loan to value is safe in your opinion? I have no problems if you go to 80%. It doesn't matter to me. You can go to 95 as long as it's cash flowing. And you have the ability to weather, as long as you have cash reserves too, right? I mean, if you're cash flowing at 95% loan to value, and rents drop a couple $100 a month across your portfolio, do you have the cash or the ability to pivot? That's how I look at it. So you do sell or keep your investment residential property? No, I just bought a condo downtown 3 weeks ago. So still just added one, but I think I'm good for now. I'm not super bullish on like real estate values. I mean, I think it's going to do just fine. I think that again, it's more the ability to leverage at 1.5%. That intrigues me. I still think you have more upside in like. I think you'll have a lot more upside in things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and various stocks, for example. So you have any recommendations for income producing assets, preferred shares, stocks? Again, I'm not going to get like too much into stock picking because it's not my expertise. But if you do like real estate, you want a bit of a safer play, in my opinion, maybe a little bit more contrarian as well, is I like the EQR Equity Residential. That's the founder and the owner of that company is Sam Zell. He's a real estate mogul, probably the most respected guy in the residential space, and the largest residential apartment owner in the United States. So it's a highly liquid stock. I think it yields about 4.5% right now. And you're investing alongside Sam Zell, who is, again, if anyone knows how to navigate a market, it's that guy. Oh, that's a good question. Franco says, do you see American or Canadian stock markets eventually having the same fate as the Nikkei in the late 80s where it crashed and never recovered? The only reason why I'll say no, that's different than Japan, is because every central bank today is printing. So back when that stock market, the Nikkei crashed, it was like nobody else was printing. Nobody was printing money at all. But now you have every single central bank in the world competitively printing money, competitively trying to devalue their currency. Everybody's trying to get a leg up. So when you have every central bank actively devaluing their currency, I just don't see a scenario where you crash and just never recover. I think that I just don't see it. Central banks aren't worried about profits, Clem. You have the ability to print their own currency. Am I having to jump through hoops for my multiple real estate investments? Not really. I mean, I have a little bit tougher for me because I earn my money through a corporation. I'm not really a T4 income person. Short to medium term outlook for the Alberta economy post COVID. I still think it's going to be a bit of a struggle and a battle for the next 3 to 5 years. But I think they have the ability to pivot and slowly start to build a tech space, leveraging cheap office and cheap affordable housing. What do I do with $200,000 cash today if you want to diversify in different sectors? Depends on what you want to do, obviously. I mean, maximize out your tax-free savings, shelter, things like that. I mean, obviously, I think there's a tremendous upside in things like Bitcoin and Ethereum in terms of like the most upside, but again, there's also a lot of risk involved in that. So you have to have a stomach for volatility. Don't small business losses become relevant to the job and housing market here at some point? What's going on? I still think it's a currency valuations out prompting that. If you look at household balance sheets, like they could have more cash than they have ever had. It's just this government transfers, nowhere to spend their money. They've all had mortgage deferrals, a lot of them. So I just think that it's surprising, but they've been able to outdo it. What am I drinking? I'm drinking it's layer cake. It's a Cab Sav, California, 2018. It's not bad. What happens to commercial banks with central bank digital currencies? With the Bank of Canada, let them fail? I don't think they're going to fail. I don't think they're going to go anywhere, but I think they become increasingly irrelevant. And it's probably, I think that's a slow death for the commercial bank. They're slowly becoming irrelevant. A lot of questions on Bitcoin. Yes, I have Bitcoin, and no, I don't think it's too late to buy Bitcoin. I still think the upside is much, 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 much higher. But I still think that you'll probably have a significant pullback after this huge run up. I think we'll have probably a pretty big pullback. 11 Citadel leaving CMHC affect the market anyway? Will stress test be more relaxed? Stress test is actually done by OSFI, not CMHC. I think you have a possibility where Evan, I actually like Evan, but I think that whoever comes in after him, I think won't be as pessimistic or won't be as antagonistic towards the real estate industry. And so I actually think that there might be some more support there potentially for the real estate market once he leaves. What do you think of the townhouse market in Burke Mountain Townhouse? Burke Mountain Townhouse. I don't know. I like Burke Mountain. It's nice. I mean, I don't have too many thoughts on the townhouse market. I think if you're buying there to live in for the next 10 years, you probably do pretty well. Spring real estate market in Vancouver, more buyers or sellers? More buyers. You have record low inventory right now. So you have to think about it this way. If you have record low inventory in a housing market, just for that to start to pivot and go and build the supply in order to then start, in order to slow price growth, you have to build a supply, and supply doesn't build overnight. It's not like the stock market. So it takes time to build the supply in the housing market. So people will say, well, okay, when do you think prices will drop? Well, prices can't drop if you have 2 months of supply on a national level, the lowest that we've ever seen. You need that months of inventory to get from 2 to like 4, and to go from 2 to 4, it's not going to happen overnight. So I just think that, until that starts to change. Best city to invest in for income generating property for the next 5 to 10 years depends. I think if you're looking for upside, I don't know, capital appreciation, I don't know, Montreal maybe. Cash flow, New Brunswick. Where did you personally buy your Bitcoin? What exchange do you own a ledger for? I bought mine through a Canadian company called ShakePay. They're regulated. I thought that they were the easiest to deal with. Yeah, Bitcoin. If you want to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum, those are the two that I buy. I just use ShakePay. They're like I said, they're a Canadian company. I don't think that they're definitely not the cheapest in terms of the transaction costs, but I find that they were the easiest to set up and whatever. I mean, I don't mind paying slightly larger fees for ease of paying or so I don't know. Again, with Bitcoin's going up, 300% this year, I'm not really too worried about like a minute transfer fee. Do you feel that we will see big inflation soon? I'm not really a huge inflation guy, to be honest. I don't know. I think you have inflation of asset prices, which is just because like the mechanics of like QE is like the money that gets like sort of like printed into the system, like kind of it just basically just funnels into asset prices. Like people aren't really incentivized today to like start businesses and like it's just like everybody just takes currencies and dumps it into assets. So I think that's more of your inflation. I mean, I think you get inflation scares, but I don't know. I still think the demographics for inflation aren't that great. I still think technology is deflationary. So I think the inflation as it's measured, which is CPI, I fail to see it really like taking meaningfully higher. Mike says, thanks, Mike. Appreciate the support. What are your thoughts on commodities, copper, oil, lithium? Cheers. Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts. I mean, I'm bullish oil. Like I'm not like bullish like in the long run, but I think like it's so depressed, and I personally own like some oil stocks. But uh, yeah, I mean, commodities have done well. I think they could very well do well. I don't have really any major positions. Like I said, all I have is I have some oil stocks, and yeah. When do you see rents rising in Vancouver again? Summer 2020 or later? That's a good question. I actually don't see rents rising until probably 2022. Not your keys, not your coins. Yeah. Can we expect a busy renovation season this spring? Yeah, I think so. Is there a risk of deflation with all this technology and AI over the next 10 years? Yes, I did an interview with Jeff Booth. He's a Vancouver guy too. He wrote a book, smart guy, and he's in the tech space. He thinks that like again, tech is obviously deflationary, and that like central banks, because tech is so deflationary, that the central banks are trying to like out print technology or like the advancements in technology, and that as tech becomes more and more deflationary, that central banks' reaction function is going to be, well, we need to keep printing to get it to reduce inflation. And so they're kind of going down like this, like the game that they can't win. I tend to sort of agree with that. I think like anytime you get like CPI below 2%, which is a stupid metric to begin with, these guys basically just print. And it's like, well, it's just like, what's the end game to that? Boston getting involved in a court sale, foreclosure, looking at one in Boston. Um, yeah, I like foreclosures a lot. I know a lot of realtors that shy away from it because they don't know how to do them. But I think that I usually get like a 5% discount typically on average. Best way to contact me. Yeah, if you want help, I actually grew up in Tawasin. My mom lives there partially. So you can just email me. It's steve@stevesaretsky.com. I'll happy to help you out. Burnaby versus East Van for detached. I think it's going to be pretty much a wash. Do you invest in multifamily real estate as syndicators? No, I don't, but I am looking into that. It's something I'll probably do in the next few years. I have friends that do it. It's a little bit of a different asset class. it's again something I'll be more involved with. I think down the road in the future, but right now just kind of focused on like what I can do myself, and then we'll see where that goes. Do you think coffee will go to $100 in 10 years? I don't know. Maybe at this point, probably. Uh, can you comment on farmland? Bullish farmland. I think farmland will do really well in the next 5 years. Possibility of a bank failure in Canada. Do you think there's a possibility? Yeah, sure. Eventually, I mean, I think that's inevitable. Bank failures always happen. Canada's been pretty lucky. Um, Personal recommendation. Maybe a lot of people don't know this, but there's CDI insurance in Canada up to 100,000. So if you're holding more than $100,000 at any one particular bank, you might want to diversify that into other banks. So put 100,000 at RBC, put 100,000 at TD, etc. You don't want to have too much cash in one bank. Again, that's a little bit more doomsday, but it's a pretty easy thing to like avoid if you can. How do you own so many properties? You need to put down. I don't own that many properties. I only have 2 properties that I currently hold. I buy and flip properties fairly frequently, but that's usually not like a lot of the times I'm not getting actual mortgages on those flips. So I'm using lines of credits and investors and in my own money, obviously, business partners. Um, As a Vancouver real estate agent, how do you feel about doing business in Victoria? John, as much as I'd love to help you, I think that I would personally be doing you a disservice. So I would personally refer you out or just recommend somebody in Victoria. I just think I wouldn't be doing you a good service. You mentioned you purchased a condo. Was that in Toronto? No, I bought a condo downtown Vancouver. I bought a condo downtown Vancouver 3 weeks ago. I got to close on it in a couple weeks. Yeah, I thought the timing was right. I think I paid $490 for it. It's a 1 bedroom, and the person that sold it to me paid $575 2 years ago. So I think I got a decent deal on it. I don't think it was a crazy steal, but it's something that works. Cash flows. See what happens. Are the viaducts still coming down? Yeah, they are. Are you bullish on Falls Creek East? Yeah, I am. I think everything's moving east. Very bullish on the east side, much more than the west side. Bearish or bullish for ESG policies in Canadian natural resource industry? I don't have too much thoughts on that. I think the ESG stuff is grossly overplayed, but it's hard to fight it because now you have central banks coming in saying that they have a climate change mandate, which is kind of ridiculous. That the central bank has a say on global warming or climate change is kind of ridiculous. But again, it's not something I necessarily want to fight because I think there's a lot of vested interests that are pushing for this ESG stuff. So hence why I like oil in the sort of near term, but I think over the longer term, obviously, I think it's a dying industry. Slowly, slowly. I don't really. Mehar is asking me. I don't really. Yeah, would I rather look for commercial, residential? I would say residential. I'm just not a commercial. I just think like residential is like it's time proven. Like people always need a roof over their heads. People always need shelter. Um, you always need shelter. So I just don't. I always there's always a demand for residential real estate. Yeah, it's going to ebb and flow. It's going to have price fluctuations, but like I don't know. Just think it's less disruptible. Peru's good to see you, buddy. Thanks for joining this AMA. Do I think it would be ideal buying a 30-year leasehold downtown Vancouver? I don't really like leasehold per se. I think there's a little bit more uncertainty. Um, All right, I got about 5 more minutes here. I'm running out of energy. What are the advantages of incorporating a rental property? That's something I go to my tax planner for that. That's something I hold mine on my own personally right now. How do you feel about the Burr strategy during this time or in general? I like the Burr strategy, love it, but I will say this is it's incredibly, if not impossible, to do in Vancouver. Um, people, that's the one thing is like people understand. I love the bigger pockets guys and people in the US, but it's different markets. Like you just have to understand what works in your markets. Like in Vancouver, that's why most people in Vancouver, the way that they make their money is through developing. Because people, you buy and sell property in Vancouver, it's actually not that feasible to actually like hold property in Vancouver because nothing cash flows. You have to put so much money down, and to tie up 20-30% of your money, it's like it's an opportunity cost. Someone's asking me to go to Townhouse in Fleetwood. Should I keep until a second SkyTrain? I think I'm buying a second. I actually really like Fleetwood. I have some inside information on that location. There's going to be a ton of development there. And I personally would not sell in Fleetwood. I would probably hold. In fact, I've been looking at Fleetwood, but not interested in buying there right now. But it's something that if I had some spare money kicking around to throw away, I would probably go. I think Fleetwood's interesting, preferably detached in Fleetwood. My only concern is Fleetwood is they're going to potentially overdevelop it. But ultimately, I think density is better for values. So, you recommended Between Debt and the Devil, which I just finished reading. Good book. Any other books that you recommend? House of Debt. House of Debt. If you like Between Debt and the Devil, House of Debt, but that's kind of similar. So I don't know. I actually really enjoy. I've really enjoyed. What's his name? The guy that wrote. The guy that wrote The Big Short. He's got a couple of other books that he's written. He's all like in the finance space, and he's a really good storyteller. There's one called Boomerang. I would recommend Boomerang. That was a really good book. So, do you think principal paydown is the new cash flow in Lower Mainland? I mean, I think like that's kind of how I look at it. To be honest, like obviously, I don't buy negative cash flowing properties personally. It's not. I don't still think it makes much sense. I know some people do for tax reasons, but I still think like principal paydown is just like it's just. I mean, rates are at zero, and I mean that's kind of how you have to look at it here. And then if you get some upside, you get some upside. Ray Dalio books, yeah, Big Debt Crises is a good book, but it's not really a book. It's more of a PDF online. Do you believe the appreciation in average housing prices we've seen the past decade are realistic for the future? No, I don't. I don't think that you're going to get nearly the same sort of price appreciation moving forward. Yeah, Michael Lewis. Thanks. Big Short. Michael Lewis, Boomerang. That's a good book. Yes, I still play hockey, but not right now. Bonnie shut us down. But yeah, I usually play once a week in a beer league. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to tap out here. I'll answer two more questions if they come through, and then I'm going to pack it in. Yeah, I appreciate you guys coming on. We got a pretty good turnout, over 300 people. Still going here, an hour 15 in. Okay, so Anthony says, any thoughts on the Alberta condo market? Looks like the decline in the condo market is accelerating here. The place I rent dropped through 7.5%, fourth year in a row it's declined. Yeah, I think that condo market in Calgary, or Alberta. I just think like if you're going to buy in Alberta, it's like the cost of land is so cheap there. Like I just don't think it makes sense as an investment to buy a condo in Alberta. Now, again, if you want to just buy a condo to live in and enjoy, because that's the kind of thing that's what you want to live in, then I would say, okay, great, sure. But I think if you're trying to buy a condo there to like make money, I just think it's a bad idea. All right, we're gonna end it on this one. Sandy Raymond, he said, "Am I still an Avalanche fan?" Yeah, I'm a diehard Avalanche fan. Through thick and thin, through the Joe Sakic years, I think that I'm super excited for this year. We think we've got a cup contender, so I'm glad the NHL is coming back, even for a shortened season. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some fans back in the stands later, maybe towards the end of the year, and I can go to Denver and watch a couple games, hopefully for the playoffs. But it still feels far away. So, yeah, big ass fan. So we'll end it there. Thanks, guys. I think we'll do more of these. I mean, honestly, I wasn't really sure what the tournament was going to be like. You never know. And this is my first YouTube live I've actually ever done, so wasn't really sure what to anticipate with these kind of things, but. I want to thank you guys, obviously, for the support. Hope you guys had a good New Year's, good Christmas, and a really good 2021. We'll continue to put out new videos on a weekly basis. I'm going to ramp up the content production. I know people have been complaining for a while about my audio, so I'm actually looking to hire somebody in the works right now that will help with a lot of these technical issues, and we'll keep getting better and moving forward. So thanks a lot. Have a good night. We'll do this again soon. Take care, everybody.